Hi, Caroline Kearney here at Powell Arts, and I'm standing with the lovely Nina Yocom, and we are in front of her piece, which will be in Changelings from now through November 20th. Nina, can you introduce us to your piece?
Great, yes, I'd be happy to, thank you. So the title of this piece is called Wanderers, and the medium is alcohol ink on Yocom, which is synthetic paper. Alcohol ink flows very nicely on synthetic paper or on other surfaces, anything that is non-porous. And this particular piece, I used a variety of different tonal aspects, and some of them come forward a little bit more and some of them retreat, and that was done on purpose. So the first tonal pieces or colors that I had started out with, I wanted to give the indication that there were beings, what I call wanderers. And in many of my pieces, I tend to see a repeating pattern of entities, whether they're singular or in this case, in mass or in group. And then to give this more vibrancy and a little bit more interest, I added another color which comes through as a gold kind of, it's not quite sparkly, I wouldn't call it sparkly.
Yeah, but it gies it a nice metallic dimension.
There you go. Thank you very much. That's the word I was looking for. So thank you.
I get it right sometimes.
So that's how I started out with this piece.
So the word that I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about this was geode. There's an aspect of this that combines something like you would see, it has a very crystalline quality, and yet it looks like you can see shapes that look like faces, I think, like that are moving together within the piece, which I think is really interesting. And I like the way that you've used the overlapping and the concentration of the ink to give like the little perimeters of the beings, the entities, if you will. There's also, what I think is interesting about this one in particular is in your work, you either have a centralized structure that is in the center that we're navigating through, or you tend to, like in Generations 2, it tends to completely cover. And this, what's funny is you've used the white to pop out in between all the beings. Was that intentional, or is that something you're experimenting with? How does that work?
That is intentional. So I do like to leave in some of my work, I do like to leave a little bit of white space, especially if I'm dealing with color that is more intense. With alcohol ink, I can manipulate the color density, and I can do that in a variety of ways using a number of different solutions and complementary medium or things that I can use. And one of those things that you can do is you can use, and I use a heat tool, and that heat tool it's really like a blow dryer, but at a very intense heat, and they push the colors along. So as I push these colors, I wanted to make sure that I did have some white space in between, just to give it just a little bit of rest.
Well, and also it allows this to feel like a crowd because the feet are more diffuse than the bodies.
Yes,
so
that's absolutely, yes. And so you do see some delineation, and these do look like kind of feet moving along.
Or some sort of central thing that grounds them.
Grounds them, and pushes them along.
So I haven't, in the other work I've seen by you, you've used pens and things like that to add metallic detail. I'm assuming that the gold is also an alcohol ink. Is it different? Is that different to work with than the more watery medium? I guess it's not water, but the more, what's the word? Not solvent.
Yes, it's so the
liquid.
Yes, so the liquid inks, the alcohol inks, the vibrancy and the concentration of the ink is far different than the metallic. So when you're dealing with the metallics, and in this case, I painted them along.
Oh, okay. That makes so much sense.
As I paint them along, I wanted to line them up and give them some definition. So in many cases with alcohol ink, you can use tools to move the inks along,
Mhm.
to move the painting along, but you can also use like pen
Or a brush, yeah.
or a brush. I've seen people do a variety of different things. So in this case, these are kind of brushed on just to give it more detail.
Do you do that afterwards or
Afterwards.
so after it dries? Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
So that
Yes.
and so you're using it more as like you said to give definition and accent.
Yes, and that's one of the things I love about alcohol ink
Mhm.
is that you can use different you can use different mediums. You can use acrylic, fluid acrylic.
Mhm.
You can use anything and everything on top of the alcohol ink once it has dried.
Yeah.
Well, I was also looking at this, and where the white spots are, it reminds me so much of things that watercolorists will do, where they'll put down like a little bit of wax or something else in order to go and allow them to save spaces. Do you think as you're applying in terms of saving some spaces for this and saving other spaces for that?
Yes, and when you are leaving some of these white spaces and very carefully laid out, I do that intentionally. Now that sometimes with alcohol ink, it does get pushed over, and in this case, there's a little bit here that showed a little bit more delineation, but I'm satisfied when it does soften into a color. And I don't look at it as a mistake. I look at it as that's the color that was meant to be for that
Well, and then
particular
the other
spot.
overlaps kind of work to provide definition to the larger structure, which is nice.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I love so much about the colors and the intensity. You can go deep, or you can go light,
Yeah.
and you can manipulate it.
Yeah, and you have a lot
different
of
ways.
great, you always have a lot of great variation within your pieces. And something else that I really like is you always, like you said about the spaces, but even within your colors, you leave spots for eyes to rest. Like, which means that you can look at it from up close or from a low, and you can get a different feel, and your eyes just have a lot to work with and move around. But it's not so busy that you're like, I'm overwhelmed. So,
Wonderful.
but yeah, so this demonstrates amazing change of both materiality and colors, and I just think it's a beautiful piece, and I'm so glad that it's going to be in our show.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
So, and Nina will have another piece called Bloom, which will also be in this show, and hopefully I'll insert a little picture of it right here. But we hope that you'll come see Nina's work at Powell Arts from now through November 20th. Thank you.